I had always been the punchline. Hi, my name is Tasha Reynolds, and for the past 5 years, I've been living a life I never imagined. I'm a marketing executive, 32 years old, working at one of the top firms in Houston. I handle million-dollar campaigns, lead a team of 15, and everyone at work respects me. But at home, I'm just the woman who couldn't boil water without a crisis, the one who always messed up a story, the one Matthew loved to ridicule. Matthew and I met at a company party. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, successful, with a hint of vulnerability that I mistook for interest. At first, his teasing seemed playful, even flirtatious. "You're adorable when you're flustered," he said the night I spilled my drink. But as the months passed, his jokes became less endearing and more like a way to put me in my place. What started with light teasing about my sense of direction soon grew into public humiliations. Every dinner with friends, every family gathering, Matthew found a new way to make me the fool. And I let him. I convinced myself it was nothing, that he loved me in his own way. After all, he'd always follow up with gifts, romantic gestures, like he was compensating for his words. But the truth was, his words were wearing me down. Slowly, insidiously. I started second-guessing myself, doubting my abilities, hearing his voice in my head when I had to present in meetings. Tonight, I sat in our living room, surrounded by friends, the familiar laughter echoing around me, and felt it, the crack in my heart, the snap of something breaking. I gripped my wine glass tighter, forcing the smile I had worn for years. But tonight was different. I was done. Matthew was on a roll, his jokes flowing freely, as usual. He had them all laughing, making fun of me, as if I were a character in one of his stories. "Tasha," he chuckled, leaning into the group, "you should have seen her try to give a presentation last week. She was so nervous, she called me crying because she forgot the client's name. It was like watching a train wreck." Laughter filled the room, the kind that always made my cheeks burn. I used to laugh along, play along, because it was easier than fighting back. But tonight, something in me snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. I wanted to scream, to tell them all what Matthew had done to me, what he had been doing to me for years. The jokes weren't just jokes anymore. They were weapons. Weapons he used to tear me down, to make himself feel superior. The worst part? He didn't even care how much it hurt. He was too busy basking in the attention, in the laughter. He never stopped to consider the damage he was causing. I looked around at our friends, their faces lit with amusement, their eyes fixed on Matthew, the center of their world. None of them saw the truth. None of them knew how he'd manipulated me into silence, how he'd made me feel like I didn't deserve to speak, to be seen. I felt the sting in my throat, the truth burning there, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity. It was time to stop being the punchline. It was time for everyone to know the truth. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking inside me, "maybe it's time I told you all a funny story." The room fell silent, and I could see Matthew's expression shift from smug amusement to nervousness. He didn't know what I was about to say, but I could feel the fear creeping up on him. He tried to recover, laughing lightly. "Oh, come on, Tasha, you're not drunk, are you?" His words were soft, but I could hear the panic in his voice. He knew deep down that something was changing. I wasn't going to let him hide anymore. "You remember the doctor's appointment we had last year, don't you, Matthew?" I asked, my voice now calm, deliberate. "Maybe you should tell everyone about it, the one where you begged me to keep it a secret." The air in the room grew heavy, thick with tension. The nervous laughter faded into uncomfortable silence. I saw Jennifer, one of our closest friends, glance at Matthew, her expression shifting from amusement to concern. She was starting to understand. Matthew's face paled, his hand tightening around his wine glass. "Tasha," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "don't do this." But I had already made up my mind. "You've been mocking me for years, Matthew," I said, my words slow, each one a deliberate step toward reclaiming the power he had taken from me. "But tonight, I'm not staying silent anymore. I'm not going to be your joke any longer." The room was dead silent now, all eyes on us. Matthew stood there, frozen, his confidence slipping away like sand through his fingers. The truth had been spoken, and there was no taking it back. "I've spent 5 years protecting you, Matthew. I kept your secret. I played along with your jokes. I let you mock me in front of everyone because I thought I was being a good wife. But I'm done." I took a deep breath. I've kept quiet about our marriage, about the things we don't talk about. But now it's time for everyone to know why we don't have children, why we never will. I saw Jennifer's eyes widen as she pieced it together. She looked at Matthew with growing disbelief. Because Matthew has been impotent for 2 years, I said, my voice steady and clear. That's why we don't have children. That's why he makes up stories about me, about my inadequacies. He mocks me to cover up his own issues. Matthew's face drained of color, his arrogance completely shattered. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked around the room as if hoping someone would defend him, but there was no one left. There, stop, Tasha, Matthew pleaded, his voice desperate now. Don't do this. We can talk about this in private. But I had no intention of letting him control the narrative anymore. No, Matthew, I said, my eyes burning with the weight of everything I had kept inside for so long. You don't get to control the story anymore. Not this time. The room was eerily quiet as everyone processed what I had said. Then, as if on cue, Alex, my boss, stepped into the room. She had been outside, waiting to drop off some contracts. But now she had heard everything. I've been standing outside long enough to hear all of this, Alex said, her voice calm but firm, and I think it's time everyone knows the truth. She walked into the room, her presence strong and unapologetic. Tasha earned that promotion. She worked hard for it. She landed the Peterson account on her own. She stayed late with the team, not because of some flirtation with her boss, but because she's damn good at her job. Matthew's face turned red with rage, but Alex wasn't finished. The only person in this room who's been riding on someone else's coattails is you, Matthew, and it's time everyone knows that. Matthew turned to face her, his jaw clenched, but there was no longer any authority in his eyes. The game was over. I had won. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on me now, the air thick with the truth that had just been laid bare. Matthew stood there, his face twisted in anger, but I saw it, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time in years, he was vulnerable. The mask he had worn so confidently had cracked, and the ugly reality of what he had done to me, to us, was now out in the open. Do you feel better now, Tasha? Matthew sneered, his voice low, tinged with bitterness. You think this makes you stronger? Making me look like the bad guy in front of everyone? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. For so long, I had allowed his cruelty to define me. For so long, I had let his mockery dictate my every move, my every smile, my every laugh. But not anymore. Tonight, everything had changed. You were never the good guy, Matthew, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. You've been tearing me down for years, making me feel small, making me question myself at every turn. And I let you, but I'm done now. I'm done hiding the truth to protect you. You've humiliated me in front of our friends, in front of strangers. But the truth is, it's always been about you trying to cover up your own flaws by making me look like the one with all the problems. Matthew's face darkened, his anger turning into something more dangerous. He took a step toward me, his eyes filled with fury. You don't know what you're doing, Tasha, he spat. You think you've won? You think this little revelation makes you the hero? You've ruined everything. Everything we had, all these years, gone. Just like that. His words stung, but they no longer had the power to break me. He had used his anger to control me for so long, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I stood my ground, my hands steady at my sides. You're right, Matthew, I said, my tone cold and final. Everything we had is gone, but it's not because of what I've done. It's because of what you've done to me. You've been lying to everyone, using your charm to manipulate people into thinking I'm the problem, when in reality you've been the one tearing me apart. I turned to the room, looking at our friends who had once laughed along with Matthew. Never questioning his cruelty, their faces were now a mix of discomfort and regret, realizing the truth of everything they had been a part of. You've all seen it, I continued, addressing them. You've seen the way he's treated me, the way he's made me the punchline of every joke, the way he's made me feel like I wasn't good enough. But I'm done hiding it. I'm done letting him control the narrative. Jennifer, who had been quiet up until now, stood up, her eyes filled with empathy and support. She took a step toward me, her voice steady but full of conviction. Tasha's right, Jennifer said, looking directly at Matthew. We've all seen the way you've treated her, Matt. The jokes weren't funny, they were cruel. And I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. Matthew's face twisted in anger. his eyes darting between Jennifer and the others, as if searching for someone to back him up. But there was no one left. "You all are just turning on me now?" Matthew asked, his voice trembling with rage. "After everything I've done for you? You're going to side with her? You're going to believe her over me?" But it was too late. The walls he had so carefully built around himself were crumbling. His friends, my friends, weren't laughing anymore. They were seeing him for what he truly was. "Yes, we are," Brad said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "We should have said something sooner, Matt, but we didn't, and now we have to face the truth." Matthew's expression faltered, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes. It was as if he realized that the power he had wielded over me, over all of us, had disappeared in an instant. But he wasn't done yet. He turned back to me, his voice low and threatening. "You think this is the end, Tasha?" he said, his words cold and calculated. "You think you've won? Well, let me tell you something. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." But I was done being afraid. I was done being the one who cowered, who apologized, who shrank into the background while he took center stage. I walked toward the door, my mind clear, my heart pounding with liberation. "It's over, Matthew," I said, turning back one last time, "and you can't change that." As I reached for the door handle, I heard him call out one last time. "You'll regret this, Tasha," he sneered, his voice cracking. "You think you found your voice, but you've just destroyed everything. You'll never be happy without me." I didn't turn back. I didn't need to hear any more. For the first time in years, I felt free. I stepped outside into the cool night air and closed the door behind me. Yeah. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. News of Matthew's behavior spread quickly, and the facade he had built around himself crumbled. His jokes, once so carefully crafted to make him the center of attention, now fell flat. His friends started pulling away, uncomfortable with the truth that had been exposed. Even at the country club, where he had once held court with his humor, people started avoiding him. Jennifer and I became closer, our bond strengthened by the shared experience of standing up for ourselves. She filed for divorce from Brad a month after our dinner party, using the courage she found in my actions to face her own unhappy marriage. We met regularly for coffee, laughing about things that actually were funny, things that didn't involve cruelty or manipulation. As for me, I took the promotion that had once felt like a dream and turned it into a career. Without Matthew's constant undermining, I finally felt like I could achieve everything I had worked so hard for. Alex became not just my boss, but a true friend. Someone who celebrated my successes, not just my failures. Matthew tried to salvage his reputation, of course. At the firm's annual dinner, he attempted to make one of his usual jokes about me. But when he did, someone in the crowd spoke up asking, "Is this going to be as accurate as your other stories, Matt?" The room erupted in laughter, but not at the joke. They laughed at him. The once confident man was now the joke. It was over, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. 6 months later, I walked into a restaurant and saw him sitting alone, trying to charm the waitress with his usual jokes. She wasn't laughing. As I passed his table, he called out, "Still can't take a joke, Tasha." I stopped, turned to face him, and smiled. "I can take a joke, Matthew," I said, my voice steady. "I just finally realized you were one." And with that, I walked away, leaving him in the silence of his own making. The silence that had been the loudest thing I had ever heard from him. I walked away from Matthew that night with a feeling of weightlessness, as if the burden I'd carried for so long had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't need to look back to know that his face was twisted in rage, nor did I need to hear his hollow threats. What he didn't realize was that in his desperate attempt to humiliate me, he had freed me. I no longer had to live in the shadow of his cruelty, no longer had to shrink back to make him feel superior. The truth had been spoken, and now there was no going back for either of us. As I moved into my new apartment, I felt like I was breathing for the first time in years. The freedom was overwhelming, but it was also incredibly liberating. My career began to flourish in ways I hadn't imagined. Without Matthew's constant undermining, I felt confident in every presentation, every decision I made. I found myself doing things I once feared, stepping into opportunities that would have been impossible before. My friendships grew stronger, and I found myself surrounded by people who respected me, not mocked me. But as for Matthew, his world began to crumble. The lies he'd built his reputation on started to unravel. His charming facade slipped away, and all that was left was the bitter man he had been hiding behind the jokes. The friends who had laughed along with him now avoided him. At the country club, where he had once been the king of comedy, people began to turn their backs on him. The jokes he made about me fell flat, met with awkward silences instead of laughter. His story no longer amused anyone. Even his closest friends couldn't pretend anymore. Jennifer had been right. Cruelty wears thin, and when the truth comes out, there's nothing left but emptiness. One evening, I ran into him at a local bar. He was sitting alone, nursing a drink, his once confident demeanor long gone. He tried to joke with the bartender, but no one was laughing. I walked past him, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the years of humiliation, the damage he had done to me, to us. As I passed by, I heard him call out, "Still can't take a joke, Tasha." I stopped, turned to face him, and let out a breath. "I can take a joke, Matthew," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I just finally realized you were one." The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a silence that felt right. For the first time, I was free from his grip. There was no dramatic apology, no grand gesture to redeem him. He had no words left. He was the one left in the silence, and that silence spoke volumes. I walked away, my head held high. And for the first time, I knew who I was: strong, independent, and more than enough. As I reflect on all that happened, I can't help but think of the lesson here. No one deserves to be the punchline of someone else's cruelty. We all have our own voices, our own power, and it's up to us to reclaim it when it's been taken away. Matthew's downfall wasn't just about his medical issues or his lies. It was about how he chose to wield power over others. His cruelty wasn't just a character flaw. It was a defense mechanism to hide his own weaknesses. But in the end, it was that very cruelty that destroyed him. It was his need to humiliate others that left him isolated and alone. For anyone reading this, if you're in a situation where you feel small, where someone is using your weaknesses against you, remember, you have the power to change the narrative. You have the right to stand up for yourself, to speak your truth, and to stop letting anyone diminish your worth. You deserve respect, you deserve love, and you certainly deserve to be free from the weight of someone else's cruelty. To everyone who has ever laughed at someone else's expense, to everyone who has used humor to tear someone down, remember that the jokes you make may not be funny to the person on the receiving end, and sooner or later, those jokes will lose their power. The truth always comes out. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in the face of cruelty? What was your turning point? Let's talk about it. Share your stories, your thoughts, your experiences. You never know who might be listening, someone who needs that reminder that they are not alone. And if you've ever felt like the punchline, know this: you're not the joke, you're the story, and your story is worth telling.